Hello, everyone. Good morning. I believe it's morning for all of us across the US and for anywhere else that we're being visited from. Appreciate you guys all being here. Welcome to another Coffee Conversations, which some of you know is an interactive discussion series hosted by the Academy of Communication Healthcare. My name is Zafrina Refi, and I'm a program manager for External Ed. Today, Calvin Zhou is going to be our co-host, and we are joined by our featured guest, Lori Porter. The Academy of Communication in Healthcare is a nonprofit academic community to support education, research, communication, and relationships in healthcare. And today's topic is going to be exploring the nexus between interprofessional communication and relationship-centered communication. So unlike a traditional webinar, these sessions are more like a conversation, and we really invite your engagement. So our aim is really for you to connect with your colleagues. And as a reminder, this is a two-part experience. So part one is where we're going to have an interview conversation with our featured guest, Lori. And part one is the only part that's recorded and will be available in ACH Connect afterwards. And we do encourage you to mute your audio for part one, just to minimize distractions, as well as video is optional during this portion. And we invite to use that chat feature if you're able to, with any questions and reflections. And then once we're done with the interview, we'll jump to part two, which involves the more interactive breakout groups where you're encouraged to share conversations with your colleagues. And this is where, if you're able, we encourage you to start your video and unmute your audio. And just a reminder, part two breakouts are not recorded. And so we hope that you're able to stay for the entire hour and engage in part two. And with that, I will pass it over to my co-host, Calvin.
I am delighted to be with all of you here today, in particular because I'm delighted to be the host for this coffee conversation with our, I told our staff I was going to use my hands, with our new executive director of ACH, Lori Porter. Super excited to be the co-host here with you, Lori, and really, really excited to introduce you to the group. Some of whom may not have had the opportunity to meet you before. So we'll start with our usual beginning with the coffee conversations, which is tell us where you're located and your morning beverage of choice. Maybe we'll start with those things, and I'll start first. So I'm in San Francisco, and my morning beverage of choice is really, more importantly, it's the vessel in which I'm drinking it. This is a friend of mine who's an ophthalmologist who does ceramics on the side, and so she made this for me, which is I'm very excited about. So your location and your morning beverage of choice.
Okay, very nice, very nice. Well, my location, I am coming to you from outside of sunny Chicagoland. Yes, it's very sunny this time of the year, in case others did not know that. That's a joke, right? But I'm coming to you from outside Chicagoland, an area called Bolingbrook, Naperville, which is about 35 miles southwest of the city. So that's where I'm located today. And my morning beverage of choice, it's usually just really a tall glass of water, sometimes with some lemon in it, right? But helps me to kind of start my day off and get my hydration that I need, right? So that's what it usually is for me. Yeah.
Hydration, very, very important. So if you would let us know what you've now been the executive director at ACH for just over 4 months, I think. And would love to hear what your prior professional work was and what your current professional work is.
Okay. All right. So just a little bit about me, my background, some of my professional story. So I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist by background. And so that's where my core training lied in undergraduate. I'm from Michigan originally, went to Michigan State University doing my bachelor's there, and then went on to do my dietetic internship in Indianapolis at IUPUI, Indiana University there, and graduated and finished, and then started my work as a clinical dietitian, really, right? And working in HMOs and hospitals and so forth in the Chicagoland area. where I have been for most of my adult life, right? But around the year 2000, after working, like I said, for a period of time as a clinical dietitian, got into working in professional associations, right? So for me, in associations, we sometimes say people enter in different routes, but for me, I entered the route of working in professional associations via my own professional association, which at that time was the American Dietetic Association, now called the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And so started working there as a manager, and then later became the director of what we call dietetic practice groups, specialty practice groups, right? And so I just tell people enjoyed that immensely, that introduction to association management, learning a lot more about the profession and so forth. But what I came to realize was that I really enjoyed many of the educational things that I was doing with the groups, right? So that led me to my next opportunity of working at another organization, Diabetes Educators, here in Chicagoland as well. Multi-professional association of nurses, dietitians, pharmacists, and physicians primarily. And the work included a director of education there, right? Doing a lot of things with education and webinars and certification and accreditation and so forth. Which then again kind of led me to my next role of working at another organization here in Chicagoland called the ABMS, the American Board of Medical Specialties, doing some work with standards and professional standards and so forth. During that time, I also became interested in interprofessional education, both at AADE and then working in that role as well. But that led me back to school and then back to another role at Ball State University, my most recent role before coming here to ACH, where I was Director of Interprofessional Education and Practice, and then also served as the Dietetic Undergraduate Program Director there at the university. So, and now, of course, excited to be here with ACH, working as the Executive Director for the organization. So that's just a little bit about my background and experiences. So,
So a lot of prior experience, and we're so lucky and delighted to have you here with ACH right now. And also, I'm tracking the chat in terms of people's locations and their morning beverage. There's also at least one other RDN on the call, which is really lovely to see. So looks like you've had a lot of experience in prior organizations before, and you've come to us where our focus is on communication in healthcare. And so I'm wondering what brought you to your interest in communication in healthcare, and what drew you to ACH?
So interest in communication, right? I was alluding to just a few moments ago there. When I was working particularly at the diabetes group, became interested in interprofessional education, right? And communication is such an important part of interprofessional education, right? It takes us into teams and teamwork. And so one of the things that I came to realize and know and understand was how important communication was with our clinicians in working, as with others on teams, with patients, with clients, with administrators. And what I really also came to learn and understand was how much better, I was hearing this anecdotally, right, from a lot of individuals, but you could also see it as well, that nurses would tell me they were better nurses because of what they were learning and experiencing and communicating with, pharmacists and dietitians. Dietitians would tell me that they were better dietitians because of what they were learning and how they were communicating and growing, again, from their experiences with pharmacists and nurses. So this world of interprofessionalism really is what kind of drew me to communication. So and then the second part of your question, where you asked me about what drew me to ACH, right?
Us, yeah.
To ACH. Well, a number of things as well, right? I love the fact that the organization is really kind of this learning organization about the art and science of communication, which again is very much so at the core of teams and teamwork, right? But we know as well that it makes a difference in the lifestyle of patients, in the lifestyle of how we work with each other in our families, in our communities. We know that communication makes a difference in how patients feel and perceive about their care, and then ultimately their outcomes, right? So that's a couple of things. But then the other thing I would say is the commitment that the organization has to DEI, right? So in working in that space as well is something that's very important to me as well.
Mm. So many of your prior experiences where you've known or noticed and also gotten deep experiences with the fact that communication leads to learning and connections with you mentioned patients and colleagues and probably ourselves as well. And so again, we're really excited to have you join us. And this focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion also is something that the organization is really committed to. And insofar as you are able to help us move further in that direction, we're really excited about that.
Right, right. And in the interprofessional aspect, right, as well, we know ACH started out at the core as a physician-based organization, right? But we have so many others that are coming into the fold as well. And so again, that aspect of it really is intriguing and exciting to me as well, because again, it gets to that heart of interprofessionalism, collaboration, collaborative care. Again, those whole things, those things go together: communication, interprofessionalism, interprofessional teamwork, right? And so I think that ACH has a real opportunity to move the needle, in this space, in this area. So.
So here's where we are now. We're at the topic of our conversation today, which is exploring the nexus between interprofessional communication and relationship-centered communication. And I wonder what your take on interprofessional communication and how it relates to relationship-centered communication.
Right. So, I mean, communication, we think of it, as our dialogue between, persons, but, in the healthcare realm, I think it's all levels of communication. It's clinician to patient, it's clinician to our peers, it's to administrators, it's to families, to communicators, to others in the community, right? And so it's doing so in this like kind of responsible manner that helps to improve healthcare and outcomes, right? Because that's what everyone is really working towards in terms of improving communication and having better relationships. So, and I think relationship-centered communication is just at the core of it. I mean, there's so many, tenets of it with, active listening and responding with empathy and so forth, that when we bring those elements to our conversations and to our work and to our conversations, that's what will center it and will also ground us and will hopefully again lead us to having better communication, better relationships. So there's really that synergy between the two, right?
So that by using active listening and empathy with our colleagues, with our interprofessional colleagues, it furthers this mission of deepening not just relationship, but also the outcomes that we're all moving toward. And because you've had such extensive experience in the dietitian as a dietitian, as well as in the diabetes education world, how have you seen or have you seen that these skills have been used or have not been used, and what opportunities do you see there, or have you seen?
I'm thinking back to a couple of things, right? When you You pose that question, Calvin. I mean, I think back to, and I don't think I really even understood it at that time, right? I think back to my time of working as a clinical dietitian in hospitals and HMOs, as I was saying earlier. And I saw a lot of patients at the time, did a lot of counseling around the area of diabetes and heart disease, right? Particularly type 2 diabetes. And of course, if you know anything about type 2 diabetes, it's management through lifestyle and medication and diet and exercise and so forth, right? And so, there's a lot that goes along with diabetes and the care of diabetes. And so in my work with patients, what you begin to see is that, them coming back to you for a number of visits, it is relational, right? It's relational in your communication with them, in them building a level of trust with you in terms of what you're doing, recommendations, but even more and even beyond that, they're coming back to you, they're beginning to talk to you about different things that are going on in their life. You can, learn that and then also learn better ways to communicate with them and help them also formulate plans of care, right? So very relational. So at the time when I was doing that, so many years ago, I didn't really, see it through that lens, but reflecting back, I do now as well. And so then thinking about, again, my work when I was working at Diabetes Educators Group, they're working with other clinicians then as I began to hear their stories and learn about, again, working with patients. And again, when you work with someone with diabetes, it's a long-term condition, right? So you're able to form that relationship, and the better the relationship, the better the trust, the better the care, and hopefully the better the outcome for the patient. So that's just, an example again of that relational connection between, communication with patients. So.
Right. Any healthcare professional needs to build on this fundamental relationship development, understanding where the other person is coming from and doing what we need to do for them in order to make their care as optimal as possible. So I think it's very inspiring to hear that, all of us in healthcare have this important foundation. And then moving into the interprofessional communication, thinking about if you could tell us what your take on interprofessional communication as it relates to, so that's from professional to patient. You mentioned earlier how this can impact the way that we interact on teams, and I wonder what your thoughts are, what your vision is in terms of that.
So. Teamwork, I mean, so much goes into teamwork. I mean, individuals, can just, study the dynamics of teams. But again, when I think about communication and interprofessional communication, you can't think about improving a team and how a team is working together without focusing on how they're communicating, right? And so, a lot goes into this in terms of even thinking about learning each other's communication styles, learning to read each other, kind of read the room, so to speak. But when that's I guess that's the core of it for me. Teams and teamwork, very important in terms of interprofessionalism. But you cannot talk about improving teams and teamwork until you really get at communication, right? So those are so closely tied as well. And I think that that's one of the really, direct core relationships between the two and ways to improve them, right?
Yeah, you were a while ago, we were having a conversation about the competencies in communication that are necessary for interprofessionals to be relating to each other, to be working together. And it seems really core to the fundamental. Without it seems obvious. Without communication, you can't get any work done. And so I wonder what your if you have further thoughts on the competency-based interprofessional communication, if there are thoughts you have about that.
Yeah. Again, I think it ties into the whole aspect of relationship-centered communication with, there's the constructs of the acronym PEARLS that's used. There's the concepts of active listening, right? Reflecting back, teaching back to the patient. Those all go into communication, good communication. And if you're working with clients, with talking to others as part of the healthcare system, administrators, teachers, others. These are all constructs that you're going to bring in. You're probably doing them sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, right? But you're going to work to include these constructs as part of your conversations. Again, active listening, empathy, reflecting back, talking to each other in a way that's respectful, right? And that includes, again, all of the broad audiences that we consider as part of the healthcare system. So,
Yeah, and there's a comment in the chat about gentle persuasion, and it seems that in order for us to do this gentle persuasion with our patients, with our colleagues, with ourselves, really, that the fundamental skills that you name are central to our ability to not only communicate with each other, but also to formulate into those outcomes that we're all so important, that we all deem so important. There's another comment in the chat about jargon, and this is Kathy saying that that each interprofessional specialty has its own jargon or interpretation of jargon, and I imagine that for you coming into this organization, we have our jargon too. You mentioned pearls. I mean, that's our jargon, right?
I tried to shorten it. I tried to shorten it, yes.
What your personal experience is, having gone from the dietitian world to the diabetes educator world to our world, what your experience of jargon has been, and how much of a barrier that is, and or becoming I guess acculturated. What your thoughts are about that.
Yeah, it is interesting, just coming from organizations or into different worlds, learning all the different acronyms, because sometimes acronyms can be quite popular, right? And so you have to actually unlearn an acronym that you may know, so that you come to the new organization or new place and space, and are able to assimilate it with the language that they're speaking. So, but it can be a barrier for us, right? So you can pick up documents or be a part of a conversation and people are using acronyms. And of course, the best thing to do, of course, is to ask and slow people down. But then taking that to our patients, right? Taking that to our patients or other audiences that we're talking to. We really do have to be careful with that, because it can be a barrier. It can be intimidating when people are, don't want to, or are afraid for whatever reason to speak up and ask.
Uh-oh, did I freeze or did Lori freeze?
I think Lori froze.
Okay, so I'm gonna, so Lori said that she was potentially going to have this. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Okay, good. Because I heard you say I froze.
And a little bit again. Oh no. So if I can just summarize, so jargon being a barrier to understanding, that you're back, thank goodness. So jargon being a barrier to understanding, and was there something else that you wanted to mention there?
Right, I was saying barriers to our conversations, to communicating and having our patients or clients or just others that we're talking to understanding things, right? Because again, it's in our haste, in our need to try to be efficient, right? It's in our writing, it's in the way we talk, but it really can be a barrier for understanding. And then I was making the point about patients or individuals not wanting to ask, and making the assumption that that there's an understanding and, the confusion that can cause. And so certainly the jargon and expressions that we use can be a barrier to communication, especially with our patients and clients and others. Yes, definitely.
And what you mentioned earlier about ACH being centering diversity, equity, and inclusion more and more in our work, the fact that we have these jargon that each individual, this is a different level of diversity, equity, inclusion, is communicating across professions or across these divides, these barriers where we have these assumptions, oh, everybody knows this jargon, and we don't. And so really making certain that we are as clear and as inclusive with our communication as we possibly can be, using that diversity, equity, inclusion lens.
Right. Which, as you were talking there, Calvin, it made me just think about something else as it relates to even, the diversity of our professions and, bringing our professions together, even in a space like this, the inclusion portion, we all have our professions and the socialization into those professions, right? And so that's what we come with, right? That's what we come with when we start to sit around the room and have conversations and talk and dialogue. And so, the learning and some might even call the unlearning that needs to occur in that process of interprofessionalism and communication, right? And that's just among the healthcare professions and bringing that together. That's why, again, the communication, the interprofessionalism aspect is so important. That gets into understanding and learning each other's roles and responsibilities, right? So that we can, again, start to have dialogues, meaningful dialogues and conversations.
So, Alva, I think I'm hoping that we're all seeing that there's this, vast world where, we want to make certain that our communication with our patients and our and all the diversity, equity, inclusion that is included in there is robust. And then, from the team perspective, similar, we're socialized differently. We all have our own, in addition to our own backgrounds that can affect the way that we perceive, that we communicate. We're seeing the world sort of becoming in technicolor right now. There's all this complexity that we're needing to navigate through.
Right. That's exactly what it is. So I think when we talk about that space of, diversity, equity, inclusion, we think about some of the common things, but, we think about the diversity and equity, inclusion aspects, again, from our professional roles as we come together as teams, as physicians, nurses, pharmacists, dietitians, social work, and so forth, right?
Yeah. I could talk to you forever, Lori, and I also want to make certain that people have the opportunity to talk about interprofessional communication in their small groups, and also have an opportunity to meet you, because I'm imagining a lot of people are here to meet you. So I think we'll bring Kelsey back in. Thank you so much for this valuable time, Lori. We've had the opportunity to speak a couple of times, and every time I speak to you, I feel more and more inspired about what you bring to the organization and what where the organization can go moving forward, just because of your guidance and your leadership. So deeply excited to have you with us.